Unifying under one voice. That's what's happening right now here at Haleiwa Beach Park as people are remembering the 9/11 holiday. I'm Brennen Scarborough for Faith and Politics, but now people are looking forward to the vaccine mandate that's coming on September 13th.
So more or less the reason that we're getting together is to bring awareness to the community, to support the local businesses and let them know that we're here not to slap lawsuits, but to in fact let them know that there's civil liberties that are being infringed. We're here to support you and hopefully appease them being in between the rock and the hard place of the patrons, as well as what's coming down the line from the government.
What we're putting in our bodies is important now more than ever. With the technology, we've already arrived to this point in time where anything and everything can go into us and we don't know. And so we have to be mindful. God gives us a spirit of discernment to discern what goes on our body, what goes in our body. And He has prepared us for such a time as this through His Word.
It's important to be here for me and my family to worship God and to take a stand against the mandates in any way that we can.
Trying to give people hope, number one. Let them know, because there's a lot of things that people are challenged with today, what's going on in our state here regarding people's livelihoods, their jobs. And
our nation was built on, our forefathers, our articles, Constitution, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, all of it. Many times over there was appeals to heaven when there was dark times in our nation. And I think really, at the end of the day, our call is for people to get back to, our roots and our foundation and things of that nature. So just giving people a message of hope in the time of, a lot of disparity.
In the Pledge of Allegiance, it says, one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. Not for some, not if you're vaccinated, not if you're unvaccinated, not if you wear a mask or not, but for all. And those were the freedoms that our founding fathers had in mind when they founded this country in 1776, signing the Declaration of Independence, which kicked it off.
the government is in a place of just taking away people's freedoms, the right to choose whether to be vaccinated or unvaccinated. And that's a choice that we want to make ourselves.
This is a climactic moment in our history right now, where we go from this point. This is the tipping point. Do we lose our freedoms and our individuality and our individual rights and become controlled by our government, or do we stand up and make our voices heard?
They're taking away people's freedoms. They're taking away your freedom to now, for the state level mandates, you can't even go to, a gym. It's not fair. It's not fair to take away people's freedoms to even go somewhere with their family if you're not vaccinated. And it's taking away your medical freedom too, because I should choose what I put in my body is what I choose to put in my kids' bodies.
And ultimately, it's not about being vaccinated or being unvaccinated. It's having the right to choose.
Some people believe that freedom is only what they give you, but freedom is what we fight for.
You're a former service member. Federal members are going to have to get vaccinated. Are people nervous about that? What are you hearing from other service members?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely think people are nervous about it. I've been in contact with many of my former colleagues, former service members. My husband is actually currently on active duty serving in the military. And
It's a huge fear with the whole military community, because for something that hasn't been tested properly and has been only under emergency use authorization, and still the Pfizer, they say that the Pfizer is FDA approved when it's actually not.
we stand firm in our convictions that God is in control and that the freedoms that the service members fought for before us are not in vain.
I've been fighting it on the military level because the military has to get all of their vaccines too. And my husband has the same genetics as my kids have, and he got sick from the H1N1 vaccine.
Do you see a community coming together from not only here on the North Shore, but just all across Oahu?
Oh yeah. All other islands. I have friends calling me and texting me, telling me what's going on their islands and how their communities are responding. They're everywhere. We've been having little roadside protests, awareness marches, almost every other day up here on the North Shore. And it's great because this is how we let our legislators know that we're not okay with this. And I'd say the majority of the people who drive by get a lot of honks, get a lot of shakas.
So we've been doing roadside, I guess, sign waving rallies on the North Shore. We've had a few of them, and it's been bringing the community together. People have different strengths. Some people have been going through and talking to the business owners and building the relationship there. And yeah, a lot of support from just people driving by. A lot of honks, more honks of support, just regarding, you know, America's freedoms and you know, just the alarm system that seems to be going off with so many people.
And if we draw near to him and read scripture and pray and seek him faithfully and diligently, he will guide us to the truth. And so that's why I'm here, you know.
All the mandates that's coming down from the government and so on. So, you know, a lot of people are kind of just striking some fear in people's hearts and stuff. And so we just want to give people hope.
I've actually been praying and fasting for this event so that I be clear-minded, you know, and I can think with a loving heart and a sound mind, because at the end of the day, the goal is for everyone to arrive in heaven, right?
People are coming to a place where they're looking for leadership. They're looking for their voice to be heard. They're looking for, you know, the people that have been called to represent, you know, the constituents to heed those voices. Yeah. So the spiritual aspect of it, you know, not everybody, you know, maybe has that courage, and the spiritual connotations, by all means. There's people that feel like there's a moral and there's an ethic duty, and you know, that can bring the faith communities together. And yeah, by all means, I think, you know, a lot of people make mention that, you know, this is dark, that this is maybe even evil, and you know, some things behind it, you know, people say it's demonic.
God doesn't give us a spirit of fear, right, but of a sound mind. And so just standing firm in trusting in what God has in store, and prayer with action is extremely important. We can pray all day, and God is mighty to perform miracles, but if he calls you to take action, being obedient to the Holy Spirit and taking action is 100%, I feel, just revitalizing and necessary.
It's not only a physical fight, it's a spiritual fight as well. Like, we're fighting against not of flesh and blood, it's a spiritual battle.
There's also a spiritual aspect to what you guys are doing today. Tell us a little bit about that.
So obviously today's the 20th anniversary to 9/11. So it's a special day. A lot of lives were affected. A lot of families, you know, are still affected. And you know, it's a time where there's a lot going on in our nation. And you know, today we just want to talk about, you know, the appreciations that we have that America holds and defends through our military.
First of all, today is 9/11. It's the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and so bringing that factor into it, honoring the service members who went before me. I'm also a veteran and recently retired from the military.
We're actually having some people that from the armed services military speaking today, and those are the ones that have fought for our freedoms, for our country.
I'm an American and I love my country, and I'm a Christian and I love my God. And this country was founded on God's principles of freedom of choice, free will. Yeah. And right now, those foundations of our country is under attack more than they've ever been before in our history. I think this is a climactic moment in our history right now.
Just to truly appreciate what freedom means, in a sense of in this country, because true freedom comes from Jesus, right? But in this country, with regard to 9/11, so many gave their lives, so many paid the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms that we are currently fighting for today, with a lot of the mandates that are happening.
As well as just the appreciation of those, even through the pandemic, that have been on the front lines, our first responders that are, you know, they're just going through a lot. People are, you know, being put in awkward positions of potentially having to leave their careers.
But now we come to a point where it's not only about a freedom in America, but a freedom of your faith.
What is the message to the higher ups in terms of what you guys are trying to say here?
It's not an easy job that they're in, but there is clearly two sides, and the people are divided. So I think at the end of the day, you know, truth is what needs to weigh in.
So I want them to open their eyes and their hearts, especially if they're here for the Hawaiian people.
To have a heart of compassion. There's many people out there who genuinely don't want to get the vaccine. They're not ready. And to just allow them that right, that freedom to wait it out, to wait when they're ready. It's not on anybody else's time. I mean, this is something that is going into their bodies. And so just to be compassionate about their concerns.
They can't force the people. they can't take away our freedoms like they own it.
If you're here to serve the Hawaiian people and, the Hawaiian population and for their rights and everything, like, you should be serving them, doing what your job is. Like, you're supposed to be serving the people of this state, not the other way around.
We're free humans. We are individuals. We have individual rights. No one has a right to mandate what gets injected into my body, into my children's body. Those are our choices to make, not yours.
Beyond even big pharma and the vaccine, there's other attributes for people to get preventative health care that would not fill up the hospitals.
We have our freedoms. We put them in office to protect our freedoms, not to take our freedoms away.
There are people out there who are truly concerned, and it doesn't mean that they're being neglectful by not wanting to get it. It's just that they're being very discerning about what goes into their bodies and how their bodies are going to be affected.
The governor really needs to listen to the people that are educated and have the information and just represent the people well and not discriminate and divide in the midst of it. Tough job,
We just want them to hear loud and clear that our voices are saying that we want our freedoms.
In a time where a lot of us are socially distancing, do you feel a spiritual connectiveness happening within the community, or is that standing out to you, especially with events like these?
You can see that there's definitely organization that's taking place within the people of Hawaii. I think there was over 8,000 testimonies in opposal to the vaccine mandates.
I see a great unity happening within the state, the people. I've met so many people on this journey just advocating for freedom, standing up for freedom, not only freedom in the country, but freedom in faith. And I've met so many wonderful people. And I actually pray intentionally that God put people specifically in my path that I can have just this divine encounter, that I may fellowship and share and witness.
That's why we're putting this on today, just to let people know that whoever is feeling that way, that they're not alone, and that we're here. And we want to just unite together, just come in agreement, and just, there's power in numbers.
The faith community has a lot to say. Yes, there are things that are tied into the realm of the spirit. There's more, desperation. There's more economic crisis. There's more suicide. There's more addiction. There's, domestics. There's financial crisis. There's a lot of things that's always been the faith community's responsibility. And, a lot of people maybe that are not involved in those communities, feel maybe the government, it's their job, but scriptures will tell us otherwise. It's always been about the people that meet the needs of the people.
So I'm a flight attendant. I've been a flight attendant for 25 years. I was flying. Luckily, I was off the morning of 9/11. I was at home. I was supposed to have been flying, but my flight got canceled the night before. So I flew through that. I flew through H1N1. I flew through swine flu. I flew through the avian flu. We were not allowed at work to wear masks or gloves during those times. This is different. I'm probably going to lose my job over not getting the jab, but I think it's something we all need to stand up for now.
We really need to get together to pray and to fast and to just lay hands on each other, that this spirit of fear just be broken off, because ultimately that's what it is, right? People, they're fearful to lose their jobs, they're fearful to lose their careers, they invest so much time into something just to be told that if you don't get it, you're going to be separated. And that's horrible. It does a disservice to them and everything that they've stood for and all the sacrifices that they've made in their careers.
And if you think it's not affecting you now, it will affect you later. Right now, they are systematically dividing us by industry, by creeds, by beliefs. So they don't have to take us on as a group. They can take us on and separate us from the herd, so to speak, and kind of work it that way. So for those of you who don't think you're affected, you will be affected. Your livelihood will be affected. Your housing will be affected. This affects us all, believe it or not. So if you have not been involved in these marches, if you've not been involved in your community, you need to get involved. You need to make sure that your voices are heard. Support your neighbors who are doing this. If you see them, honk. They're out there for you. They're out there for the community. They're out there for Hawaii. Yeah. So get involved. Yeah. Get involved. Make your voices heard. And like I said, even if it's just honking, if it's passing out flyers, do something, because sooner or later, the mandates are coming for you and they will affect you and your livelihood.
We all stood together in prayer and petition and fasting that miracles can be done. And so I think just more of that needs to happen.
The mandate already bringing multiple events like the one here at Haleiwa Beach Park all across the island of Oahu. We'll keep the very latest tabs on those. For Faith in Politics, I'm Brennen Scarborough.
Later that evening in Waikiki, a very large crowd of Hawaii residents from all walks of life gathered together to make their voices heard. The main chant that could be heard was simply freedom. The atmosphere was positive and orderly, with a massive crowd adhering to the sidewalks with flags and signs. The event lasted for a few hours. They plan to continue gathering weekly to raise their voices for freedom in direct opposition to the vaccine mandates imposed on Hawaii that will affect local economy and small businesses.
Nobody delivers good news to Hawaii like Kalo TV delivers the good news, because we're the only local Christian TV station that's right here on island, understanding our culture firsthand. A handful of creatives with one singular mission: to take the message of Christ even further and stronger with high-definition clarity. We are striving to reach across the Hawaiian Islands with clear, creative, and constant content that expresses the heart of Christ. Encouraging and uplifting programs broadcast through new infrastructure with next-generation technology, service, and coverage. Because the more you access Kalo TV, the more your faith will grow and be uplifted. And the more your faith is uplifted, well, this is why we do what we do. Whether it's over the air, cable, or online, the message is unmistakable. What is our mission? You, the body of Christ, encouraged, growing, empowered. What about your mission? Are you ready to partner with Kalo TV as we reach Hawaii with the good news?
Come and join us.
Can't wait to meet you. Help us spread the good news. The only thing we can do.
Come on out!
Help us bring salt and light to the islands with the message of aloha. Kalo TV. Broadcasting aloha 24/7.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. I'm Eva Andrade, and now we get to do something really exciting. We normally get to travel across the nation to talk to people, but right now we're going to go to one of my favorite islands, which is the island of Maui, which those of you that know me know that I spent every summer of my life in upcountry Maui in Haiku. So let's just give a shout out to all the people out there in Maui. And of course, welcome Pastor Sean Housman, Calvary pastor from Maui. Welcome, Pastor.
Hey, thank you.
So, Pastor, one of the things that we've been talking about is that September 11th is on our door. And we are thinking about those things that we were doing and thinking on that infamous day 20 years ago. Do you want to take us back 20 years to what was happening in your life?
Yeah, so when on the morning of September 11th, 2001, at the time I was teaching at Calvary Chapel Bible College in Marietta. And I was housed in sort of like a men's dorm, kind of a staff dorm situation. And when I woke up in the morning, got up, got ready to go. I didn't have a cell phone at the time. Communications weren't like they are today. And so I woke up and I got ready to go. And as I was walking out of my room, I saw one of our housemates, a guy named Mike. I'm like, hey, good morning, Mike. And he's like, no, not a good morning. It's a bad morning. And I'm like, what? And so he began to explain to me about how an airplane had just flown into one of the Twin Towers. And I was just in disbelief, like, oh my goodness, I was just there not too long before that. because at the time my grandmother lived in Staten Island. And so, she had taken me around the Twin Towers. I had all these fresh memories in my mind of what it looked like. And so when he said that, it hit me pretty hard. And then I got in my truck and I drove over to the coffee shop, and I saw another guy from the Bible college there, a guy named Steve. And I saw him and I'm like, "Hey, Steve, crazy what happened?" He's like, "No, it's even more crazy than we can imagine. Another plane has just flown into the building where it looks like America's under attack." And, just all the feelings and everything that just kind of comes to your mind when, the possibility of maybe more planes in the air, maybe more trouble to come, all that might mean for us as a nation. And so it was just so intense. And I think at that moment, that's kind of where I began my addiction to news, because, I just needed to find out what was happening. So I was always logging onto the websites and trying to find out what would be going on in the world. And before that, I didn't really care about current events too much, but it made me alert. And then I found some website at the time. It was called the Drudge Report, which used to be a very conservative website. And I'd be finding all my information about the events of 9/11 right then and there. And so, at the Bible college there in Marietta, California, around all the student body, we were all just reeling with this information and just kind of sitting on the edge of our seats waiting for more information to come in, because we didn't know what it meant for us as a country.
And that's so interesting, because that's exactly what's happening right now. With what's happening in Afghanistan, people are just watching. Now, it's not happening on our shores, but because a lot of the Afghan people are being brought here to the United States, and there's some question as to whether they're being vetted, there's some question as to where they're being sent, and do we really know everything we need to know about them, that people are beginning to have those same type of anxiety and feeling. And I know that one of the good work that you're doing with SaveOurAllies.org is thinking about what is happening in Afghanistan. So why don't you share with us that ministry?
Yeah, so when the news came in of, everybody saw the images of the C-17 leaving the runway there at the international airport there in Kabul. And you see the people just clinging for life, holding onto the airplanes and falling off, and to their death. There's those shocking images, and we're trying to make sense of what's going on over there. And as a church, our heart was just breaking. We called kind of an emergency prayer meeting on a Tuesday night. We all gathered around at our church property and just, we just prayed and prayed and prayed. Psalm 61, hear my cry, O Lord. Attend unto my prayers. From the ends of the earth will I cry unto you. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that's higher than I. And we were praying that for the people of Afghanistan, and mostly, predominantly at that point, the Christians and what that would have meant for them. And I didn't have any real connection to what was going on there. At least I didn't think so. But I was just, all of us, we were so moved for what was going on. And then out of the blue, the very next day, I get a phone call from one of my friends that I knew this girl from kindergarten. I went all the way through grade school with her. And then when I got into high school, that's when I had met her husband now. Her husband was from one of the local elementary schools that transferred into our high school. And I knew them all the way through high school, lost touch with them. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, they ended up getting married, and they asked me to do their wedding. So that's when I kind of got back into their life. So how did I get involved with this Save Our Allies coalition it actually kind of started in kindergarten, and just the way that God puts things together. Well, she had called me and she was asking me, they had been compiling a list of people that were there in Afghanistan, and if there was anybody that I knew that needed to be extracted, because they were doing some clandestine operations within Kabul to get people out, get them through the wire into the airport, and then on, into safety. And at the time, I only had a couple of really loose connections, so I made those connections with her, and I was just encouraging them, and that was that. And then a couple of days later, at the Pastors, Leaders, and Church Workers Conference, I get a text right during the very first session from her saying, "Hey, what are your thoughts about coming out to help us with our humanitarian endeavors here in the Middle East?" And I turned over to my wife, I showed her my phone, and I showed her the text, and we were both kind of like shook, because it was kind of, it used to be a joke of mine. When the Lord called us to Maui 11 years ago, I was really concerned about, the validity of that calling. I would always jokingly say, hey, if God calls you to Afghanistan, then it's God. But if God calls you to Maui, it might just be your own wicked mind convincing you that's where you're supposed to be. And I've told that joke so many times over the years as I explain how God called us to Maui. And so my wife told me, she's like, you always said if God calls you to Afghanistan, then it's God. And I'm like, I guess so.
I'm sitting here listening to this, and first of all, I'm amazed, and I'm not surprised that God would use you and your past and your connections to do a great work in Afghanistan, because that's the God we serve, right? He does all this kind of stuff. But you said something earlier that I'm stewing on this. So you said that she was compiling a list of the people there. Aren't we being told by the media that collecting a list of names is something that our government was having difficulty doing? And here you have your classmate doing it with no problem. So I'm wondering if this is why a lot of people don't trust what's coming out from the government.
That's part of the frustration. And in pastoral ministry, we see this all the time, that you can only say so much because you don't want to breed any animosity. If you breed animosity, then it ends up becoming an obstacle for another thing that you'd rather see accomplished. And like right now, there's a lot of room to be very frustrated with the way that things went down. And in that, it's very easy for it to become very partisan in its political leanings. And when that starts to happen, it becomes right here in the United States, a right or left kind of a scenario. And then people entrench, and then they do politics like normal. And meanwhile, like there's 8,911 people sitting in Abu Dhabi that they need a home. Right now, there's like over 20,000 people sitting on a runway in Doha that they need a home. And so it's like, we can do politics later and we can hand out medals later, but we need to start thinking about these people and their lives and who they are to us. I mean, it's such a deep and complicated situation. And I've seen on both sides of the aisle, congressmen and senators and congresswomen all the way through both sides of the aisle that are like very concerned and they want to get involved. So I have to say it straight out, like on both sides of the aisle in state level, there is a great and deep concern, but most of the obstruction and the difficulty that we're finding is coming directly from the White House. And so that's a sad reality. And I don't know if it's because they just don't know how to handle it or if it's on purpose. And that can be a debate for a later time. But I'm just thinking about the people that I've been working with there at the Humanitarian City, that, man, their lives are, their past is completely fractured now. Their future is completely uncertain. They can't go back to Afghanistan because that will be the end of them. And they don't know where they're going. It's such a sad scenario that we're looking at right now. Even though it might not be in the forefront of the media circles and the different, news cycles, it's definitely in the forefront of my mind because, I mean, I'm still getting these text messages and from WhatsApp and whatever from the people that are there. Like, please, sir, have you been able to get any more information on my case? And I'm just telling them, hey, we're praying, we're working through this, we're trying the best that we can. And meanwhile, they're just kind of in limbo.
I'd love that you said that, because when you're in the emergency room and you're bleeding to death, the doctor doesn't come in there and turn it into a political situation. They stop the bleeding and they give you the medical service you need in order to get well. So you're right. Right now we're in a crisis and we need to be focusing on our brothers and sisters that are there in Afghanistan. So what's happening on the ground right now out there?
Right now on the ground, and like Doha is a mess. That's a whole nother situation there in Qatar. But where I was specifically was in the United Arab Emirates, there in Abu Dhabi, at the Humanitarian City that's set up. And on the ground there in the Humanitarian City, it was a city that the Emirates had built specifically for COVID. So when the COVID crisis began and they didn't know what levels of severity this was going to be, I mean, we were all kind of waiting for information. We saw the images coming out of China of people just falling over dead on the subway. And so we were like really ramping up. And they did an awesome thing where they just built an entire, like, it's like a prison, but it's a city. And, each floor, like each building block is kind of built like a giant letter H. And then inside that letter H, each wing has the hallways are completely locked. Then there's the rooms that are in there. And in that there's 8,911 people in there. And each of them are kind of confined to their wing. So they have a little bit of a sense of community, but it's amazing that even in the middle of this crisis of COVID, God was going out ahead on behalf of these people so that they'd have a place to be. And so that's very special. But what we're finding is, so many people ended up getting involved in the ground operations. We had nations that were flying in their planes to help these people get out. The United States, our State Department, we were flying in our own C-17s to get people out. Now, the group that I was involved in, Save Our Allies, it was just a little like conglomerate of a couple of non-government organizations that God put together for this united task. And a couple of the guys, they went to the Emirati government to talk to them about what they had planned. And based on their military experience and their relationships that they had, they were trusted with the Emirati government. The Emirati government said, we want to get behind you. In fact, we want to, not only that, we want to contribute 7 of our C-17s to your effort. And then on top of that, Glenn Beck was kicking in from his own finances and the Nazarene Fund. He was flying planes in to help and assist our operation. It was just amazing, like all these people that were getting involved with this small little group that God had put together, and their organizational skills, their military background, their knowledge of Afghanistan, of Kabul, the way that they're able to bring order to the airport at the time in the operation. It was our team that was able to unite all the air operations under one call sign. So then everything became streamlined. We were given a dock at the Kabul International Airport to like, instead of having like terminals and gates out there, it's just docks. It's just a parking spot where they can open up the door and people can climb in. We were given a hangar there at the airport. It was a little group of 9 people. You know what I mean? Like, this is all like absolutely miraculous. But when it was all said and done, the order and the organization that was happening at Dock 8 became so good that the U.S. State Department said, hey, you want to have Dock 9 as well? And so our guys took it, and they were able to load planes. And by the time it was all done, most of them went to the Emirates, and a lot of them ended up going to Doha. But when it was all done, it was almost 11,000 people that got processed through the 2 docks that our little small team had been managing. It was absolutely miraculous. It was unbelievable, the doors that God opened in this little effort. And so from that, those people got flown to Emirates. They're locked in though because of COVID restrictions and also because of security issues. They're getting PCR tests every 3 days just to make sure that there isn't like a COVID outbreak. They don't have any future though. Like nobody's given them any assurance. And right now it's a lot of it is just kind of locking down in terms of like the US Embassy and a lack of clear information coming from them. So like right now I've been in constant contact with an American family. The mom, the 2 kids, they're all US passport holders. The dad is a green card holder. They live in Virginia. They have a house there. The mom just passed the final exam to be a doctor there in Virginia. And then from that, they flew to Afghanistan because the family is originally from there because their father had COVID and he couldn't get medical help. And so the lady, she's like, well, I'm a doctor. I can come and help you. So they flew everybody back there to go and take care of the family. And then the entire country collapses. So their return flight is now null and void. It's just impossible to happen. And they were trapped. They were absolutely trapped. And so somehow they made the connections through the vetting and the application processes that our little group was able to do. And our team rescued them. they would have been stuck there. But now they're sitting there in the humanitarian city, and they're stuck in the humanitarian city, even though they're US citizens. They have a house in Virginia. The lady's a doctor, but she's stuck in the humanitarian city because her case is slow to be getting processed from the embassy. So there's all kinds of crazy growing frustrations happening. I mean, the joke had been going on, well, why don't we just fly them into Tijuana and let them walk across the border? It might be an easier process.
I have heard that by so many people in regards to this situation, because that's a whole nother subject we'll have to talk about on the show one day. But so now people that are listening are excited about this, especially the faith-based community, because this is what we do as Christians. There's a crisis, Christians rise up and they get involved, government involvement or not, because this is what Christ asks us to do. So people are listening and they're watching and they're just sitting on the edge of their seat and they want to help you. So where do they go to find out more information and maybe how they can plug in with your ministry?
Well, there's the two things that I would recommend. Like right now, the ground operations and the processing, that's only like stage one. You know, like these people, God willing, will be coming to the United States. And, you know, I hear people saying, how do we know we're not bringing in terrorists? And how do we know we're not this? Like, I've been meeting with these people. Is it possible that some people, some pretty violent or, you know, people that aren't in line with our values would come in? Yeah, it's absolutely possible. It's possible that those kind of people are your next door neighbor already, though. You know, this is people. And most of these people have worked with our military and our efforts there in the Middle East for the last 20 years. They already were risking their lives just to be our interpreters. They were already risking their lives to be teaching in schools and, you know, because of like the Taliban tensions. And then in one night, like when we pulled out of Bagram Air Force Base, it sent shockwaves throughout the leadership of the Afghani army, because it showed them that the U.S. had intended to not keep their promises with them. And so everybody just started collapsing as the Taliban was advancing. And so now, how do you get involved? Well, there is still ongoing efforts. So, you know, you'd say like stage one is getting them out of Afghanistan. Stage two is getting them out of Kabul airport. Stage three is getting them out of the humanitarian cities where they're at. And that all has to happen in terms of the embassy. There's really not a whole lot that you can do there. There is some organizations I know, like at the one in Doha. I know Samaritan's Purse is doing a lot there. Actually, Samaritan's Purse has come and kind of joined up with our efforts in Abu Dhabi as well. It was it was really great to meet with like Ken Isaacs from Samaritan's Purse. He came out to be with us for a day or two. And so there is some involvement that's there. SaveOurAllies.org is the on the ground group that's like doing the work that's there, but we want to see them all the way to their new homes. So immediately our immediate group would be SaveOurAllies.org. But I'd also say that, yeah, Samaritan's Purse is definitely involved. World Relief Fund is building these welcome home kits already to kind of be ready to meet these people when they get to their new home and then try to become established.
There's so much work that you're doing, and we really appreciate all that. But unfortunately, we've run out of time. So make sure you visit SaveOurAllies.org to find out more information to partner. And we appreciate your time, Pastor Sean. And for those of you watching and listening, we'll be right back.
We have a mission here at Kalo TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my God. Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Kalo Outreach encourages us to give back to our communities across Hawaii. It is personal faith in action, a godly mandate where actions speak louder than words. Join us as we love on our community in practical ways. Visit hallowoutreach.com and volunteer, give, or register a community need. Together, we will make a difference to our communities. Kalo Outreach.
Aloha and welcome back. Today has been a really good, exciting show as everybody has been sharing about what they were doing on that infamous day on September 11th, when there was a shockwave across the world. And right now joining us, we have Brent Miller of Ingenuity Films, of the great Before the Wrath success. And we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, let's welcome Brent to the show.
Thank you, Eva. It's a pleasure to be on.
It's really great to have you. Now, before we launch into the great success of Before the Wrath, why don't you share with our viewers and listeners what you were doing on September 11th?
Well, at the time, I was actually living in Manhattan for several different companies out there working in new media, including MTV Networks. And I just moved from Midtown Manhattan out to Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. That horrible morning, I was coming into Manhattan, heading to Midtown for work, and coming out of the Battery Tunnel, heading up Broadway. And when the first plane hit, I was personally about 2 blocks away from the Twin Towers, and saw the immediate aftermath with my own eyes. And I'll never forget it. And to this day, it feels like it happened yesterday. And I know it has to feel that way for countless of people all over America. I pray it's something we never forget. It's part of our history, and it set me personally on a path that led to the creation of a Christian film company.
That's so awesome. And it's amazing how the Lord always uses situations like that to birth something fantastic, something that just changes the world. And you said yes to that and moved into this career field that you're in, where you're producing these great films. I just want to get your thoughts, though. There are so many people right now that they're remembering what happened on September 11th because of the craziness that's happening in Afghanistan right now, and some of the uncertainty and anxiety that they're feeling, even in the Christian community. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, first and foremost, we put our faith in the Lord, that everything that happens is meant to happen. It's to glorify him, and it foreshadows his return at the end of days for those that follow biblical eschatology. But first and foremost, we have to have trust and peace. I can completely understand the events of Afghanistan. I, like so many Americans, also very dissatisfied with the way it was handled. I think leaving was a mistake. The way that we left was absolutely a mistake. And I do think that it opens up doors to potentially result in a lot of new turmoil, potentially terrorist attacks in the United States, which is going to continue creating a lot of uncertainty in the world and a lot of instability.
I love that. And I mean, not that we're in uncertainty, but I love that you were able to use your creativity, the gift that the Lord gave you to produce the kind of films that you're producing. Like we'll talk about Before the Wrath. It was a #1 Christian documentary in 2020.
Yes. When it came out, it was the beginning of the COVID lockdown. It was released in March of 2020, and it is a docudrama about the return of Jesus. And over 20 years of new media and film production, even working for companies such as MTV Networks when I was in Manhattan, I've never come across so many just random delays and events that occurred that kept delaying the release of this film. But it's always in retrospect, we see that God's hands were on it the entire time. So even when things don't go according to plan, that's why we have to trust that obviously the Lord knows what he is doing. So in God's perfect timing, the film came out at the very beginning of the COVID lockdown. And as a result, there weren't a lot of new films coming out, and it shot to the top of all the sales charts. including on Amazon, where for a time it was in the top 10 dramas, all movies and television shows in the United States, and was the number one selling docudrama in the US for a good portion of that year.
So people that are may not have seen it, where can they go and watch it right now? Is it still available on Amazon?
Yes, it's available pretty much absolutely everywhere. And I believe some Walmarts still have it on store shelves. It's at PureFlix, Amazon, Christian Cinema, and pretty much any digital platform or any physical retailer, you'll be able to find it.
Well, we really encourage churches and pastors to get a copy of it and maybe do movie night at your church. I think that in today's uncertainty, a movie such as that will really make a difference in your congregation. So now, the movie grossed over $3.5 million. So obviously it touched a nerve. Why do you think this approach is so under attack right now with the way that you're evangelizing?
That's a very complex question. But we're essentially a apologetics-based Christian production company. So that's why we focus on doing docudramas, but of course we retell the stories and get to some new findings in some of these controversial topics that are debated within the world today through cinematics, through high budget retellings of stories on major film sets with actors, but globally. For example, even with Before the Wrath, it was recut and dubbed and released in over 100 theaters in South Korea to some pretty surprising success as well. So it's definitely a message that's resonating worldwide. But these types of productions are absolutely under attack. And if I could digress for a moment, just to lay a foundation here, I believe that this really does go back to the idea of blind faith. There seems to be this idea that there's a separation between the scientific method or rational deduction to determine worldly truths versus an alternate reality and religious ideology in which you have to be disconnected from the world. And many Christians believe this as well, whereas in reality, there really is no separation between rational deduction and belief in biblical history and the God of the Bible. So through biblical apologetics, and surprisingly for some, biblical prophecy, I believe you can absolutely prove any reasonable doubt. No blind faith needed. And in fact, in 1 Peter 3:15, the scriptures state to have a reason why you believe in your faith. So then, again, based on being an apologetics production company, we look to the Apostle Paul within the scriptures, and beginning in Acts 17:2, who Paul is also known as the father of apologetics. Remember, he reasoned in the synagogues to bring both Jews and Gentiles to the Lord. And how did he do this? Well, we're told he explained and proved, pulled right out of scripture, that Jesus was the Messiah through, and many are surprised by this, mainly through prophecy, prophetic events of what the Messiah would be, and then what Christ fulfilled. So in fact, we believe that that's why prophecy exists, especially to the non-believer, for God to prove that he is God. And that's also what makes the biblical scriptures unlike any other religious scriptures, if you will, anywhere in the world. So recently, when it comes to these political changes in society and everything we see going on, so of course, we're now seeing this massive shift. People rationalize and think in society, in which in many aspects, it's in which everybody's reality is essentially relative. And we saw this beginning, this postmodernism years ago, but is absolutely in full effect today, and even spreading through many church systems, not only here in the US, but globally. So the bottom line is that if you destroy the mechanic in which one has to determine truth, like what Paul used when he was reasoning in the synagogues, then for those people, truth can no longer be found. So personally, I believe this is what we're seeing in the prophesied end times, the apostasy of the church.
Well, it's amazing because Paul, he was out there getting attacked all the time, right? I mean, this is what he did. And he did it with such valor, and he did it with such strength and truth. But Amazon and groups like Amazon are canceling information like this. They're canceling these type of documentaries. The whole changing politics are crippling the film industry. So I'd love to get your thoughts about that.
Absolutely. This is something I am personally shocked is not discussed. It seems to be something that people are just completely blind to what's happening. Is that several months ago, Amazon, in which Amazon Prime for rental, for paid purchase and rental films in the United States, and definitely the largest reaching digital platform for indie productions. Yeah, Amazon has now banned all new indie documentaries, which by default means all nonfiction political and Christian films. So for example, Before the Wrath was watched by over 200,000 people on Amazon Prime alone. Potentially that's now an audience that we will likely not have for future releases. So this is absolutely a fight, even within the Christian indie filmmaker realm, the nonfiction realm. And we are literally fighting the good fight to get the gospel into the living room of Americans. And Amazon, it's deliberate censorship, and they know exactly who they're canceling, essentially. And who's making the biggest impact in the United States when it comes to nonfiction comment, no matter the budget. They couldn't care less if it was a $20 million indie film, if it's a political or religious-based documentary, anything nonfiction that's not coming through a major studio release, then it is banned and rejected for release on Amazon.
Well, Ingenuity Films is no stranger to conflict. I mean, you came from California, and because of some of the struggles you had there, you had to actually leave California. So why don't you share some of the struggles you had there?
Yeah, even out here moving Ingenuity Films to New Smyrna Beach, Florida, I think much of the country is unaware of just how bad things have gotten in California over the last year. They started getting bad within the last several years, but since the COVID lockdown, things have escalated just exponentially. Essentially because of cancel culture, censorship, even on the major Hollywood studios, backlots where we film. Conservative ideas and conservative productions are being not only placed on the back burner, but all the COVID regulations and required testing has just it required such a huge increase in production costs and time that a lot of indie studios can no longer afford to actually film in California, or if you can even get into a backlot due to the rush of the major studios getting back to work from the vacuum we had during the lockdown. Surprisingly, for our most recent film, Eating with the Enemy, which is our largest budget production to date, about Judas Iscariot, who ate with Jesus at the Last Supper, only to betray him that very night. We actually, for the first time ever, took the production of the film mostly outside of California, and we filmed it on the same backlot as the Chosen series, season 1 in Texas. So we're seeing these kind of changes where we're trying to navigate all these new political agendas that are occurring to be able to continue doing the work that we're doing.
You're in Florida now, and there's a great governor there who's doing great things for businesses. Share with us some of the excitement you have there in Florida and what's coming.
Well, right now, just we've been able to restructure the company out here. We're in the process of officially closing our offices in California and moving the rest of our primary employees, editors, et cetera, producers out here to Florida, where we're going to continue production on Eating with the Enemy, and along with several other films that are in production, including a political film called Purging America, in which we're currently discussing various scripts and discussion points with Pastor Tom Hughes back in California. But we're praying that being here in this state, that the Lord is keeping certain doors open to get the message of the gospel to millions of people worldwide. But with the shifts that we're seeing politically, with censorship and the inability for certain companies to continue working in some of these states like California, we see the inevitable writing on the wall. So, we feel that the time is coming where even independent production studios like Ingenuity Films will no longer be able to work and do the work that we do. So ultimately, we keep our faith in the Lord, and we keep fighting the good fight while we can.
Well, we really appreciate the good work that you're doing. Now, if you have any viewers or listeners right now that are interested in Ingenuity Films, where can they go to find out more about you and maybe even partner with you?
Absolutely. If you're interested in our current production or future productions, I mean, even just to offer your support and prayer, we need that tremendously. Now is the time for the body of Christ to come together and just, help minister to as many people as possible, not only here, but overseas while we can. But you can find out more about what we do at ingenuityfilms.com. And if you're interested in checking out Before the Wrath, you can go to beforethewrath.com.
I really encourage our viewers and listeners to do that. Now, because we started the interview talking about September 11th, let's do this. In this time of crisis and confusion and anxiety, why don't you give our viewers and listeners a word of hope? What is your favorite scripture and something that can maybe help people navigate these trying times?
Oh, you're really putting me on the spot.
It's what we do here on Faith in Politics.
Honestly, I look to Paul quite often in the scriptures, and I look to the encouragement regarding the end of his life, where he devoted 30 years after the resurrection of Christ to being the apostle to the Gentiles, to winning souls. And I always reflect on some of his final scripture, that he has fought the good fight, he has finished the race, and ultimately in the end, our reward is eternal life with Christ. And I think that has to be the focus in the world that we live in today, is to not fear what man can do to you, but be more concerned about what happens to your soul in death. And I think that's something that we need to focus on as a church, is that is where our hope lies, and that is why we do what we do in the life that God blesses us with here, with the time that we have now. So just keep looking to Jesus and keep praying for paradise.
And that's why we do what we do right here on Faith in Politics. And we were able to share with Brent Miller, founder and director of Ingenuity Films, and he shared his thoughts with us today. If you want to partner with us to continue programs like this on Calo TV, make sure you visit us at calotv.com and ask how you can partner to make this happen. We really appreciate Brent Miller from Ingenuity Films, and we're going to be back next week with another Faith in Politics. Mahalo for joining us. Thank you.